Good morning. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. It's great to be back. I was home visiting my brother and my family for a full week over Christmas, and it was great to see them. But it is good to be back in Minot. It feels great to be here and back at St. Leo's and to be with all of you. And what a great day. It's beautiful outside today. And it's this great feast of the Epiphany when we celebrate and remember the journey of the three wise men coming to pay homage to Jesus. And what today's gospel and the reality of the Feast of the Epiphany speaks to us about is this need for us to open ourselves up to Jesus and bring who we are to him and trust him. You know, I'm always struck, I think I've mentioned it before, but it is so apparent to me in today's gospel, the contrast between these two major players, the three wise men and then King Herod. So here you've got the three wise men who are living like practically, for all intents and purposes in the ancient world, on the other side of the world. You know, they're on the other side of the Arabian desert. They're in, we think they probably come from like the area around Babylon, which would be modern-day Iraq and the capital of Iraq. And so they would have probably like come up around the desert and then come down into Israel, which would make sense why they would go through Jerusalem first and then into Bethlehem, which is about 10, 15 miles south of Jerusalem. So they're coming from so far away. They're leaving everything in pursuit of this thing that they know to be good. You know, who knows who they were really? What drove them to drop everything in pursuit of this light in the sky? But something about the light convinced them that there's something new going on in the world, and something new and fresh and good, and I want to be a part of it. And so even though that's always a little frightening, because it's a breaking of the status quo, you know, okay, so maybe I've kind of figured out how to exist and be comfortable in this world, and yet there's now this new thing, which both brings excitement, but also maybe a touch of fear, because what all will that entail? And yet they're willing to set everything aside because for some reason they've been gifted with this spirit of trust, that they trust that they can let go of themselves in pursuit of this good thing. And then you have Herod, who's literally living like 10 to 15 miles from Bethlehem. He's essentially there already. And yet this new thing being born into the world petrifies him. Because we know actually from history that Herod he's your classic kind of, you know, ancient world scrappy leader who had to fight to the top, probably killed a bunch of people, backstabbing, lying, conniving, and then worked his way to the top and has sort of negotiated and created this little kingdom around him, where he is at the top of everything. But wow, he's always got to be careful to watch his back, to make sure no one's going to come up behind him, to make sure that everything's perfectly safe. And now this new thing, which is told to him to be a new king that was just born on his back doorstep practically, 10 to 15 miles away, petrifies him. What is this thing? And how can I destroy it? Because I need to make sure that it does not intrude on the world I've created. And you can just picture Herod, you know, sitting there in Jerusalem, you know, just like sweating, like trying to figure out, how do I make sure this thing goes away? And so then he uses the wise men. He uses them to try to get him intel so that he can figure out where this threat is and how it can be eradicated. The same exact reality, the birth of God on earth, the thing that all of us are made for. So that includes the three kings and King Herod. The three wise men and King Herod are all made for this baby. This baby will be the fulfillment and the intense happiness of both their lives. Completely different response. On the one hand, you have freedom, and it even says, so, you know, you've got Herod who's freaking out. I mean, it's all labeled right here in the gospel. I should highlight these things before I start. When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he hears the news of the birth of God on earth, he's greatly troubled, and he's filled with anxiety and fear, and it leads to violence. And when the three kings are approaching Bethlehem, they were overjoyed at seeing the star. And on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. As they lay their entire selves before the Son of God, they are filled with joy. Which then brings us to today and brings us to us. Because Jesus is coming onto this altar as real as he was in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. And we can be like either of these two players. We can be like the three wise men who drop everything and take the risk of bringing who we are and giving it to Jesus, giving him control of everything, both the good and the bad. This is the Christian way. The pagan way is to try to ask Jesus to give to us everything that we want. The Christian way is to take everything we have and say, Lord, I give it back to you. All the struggles in my life, all the sufferings, yeah. All the good things that I have that maybe frighten me to think about not having, I give them to you as well, Jesus, because you gave them to me originally out of love of me, and you know what's good for me, and I can trust you. Or we can be like King Herod, who literally was right there. He was right in Bethlehem. We're all right here. We're right in church. We're going to come up and brush arms with God when we receive him in communion. But do we really open ourselves to him? Or do we say, yeah, I'll walk through the motions, I'll go to Mass, I'll do all the stuff, but I'm not really looking for you to take over my life because I'm too afraid of what that might mean. So I'm going to just hang on to control, and I'm going to make sure that everything's taken care of the way that I best see fit. And yet what we know will happen is my life will continue down a path of anxiety and worry and fear and hurt, and never really arriving at what my heart wants. There will always be that thing like, what is missing in my life? Because we're made for him. We get the chance to come and receive him today. And yet what the church wants, what Jesus wants, is for me to let go of my heart when I do that. Say, Jesus, I'm all yours. I need you. I want you. Take over my life. Fill me up. I want to be like those wise men who seemingly have no care. They travel from the other side of the world, whatever kind of expense that meant, whatever sort of risk that meant, they just let it go. And when they reach the end, they are overjoyed. I want to be like that. I want to have that kind of freedom in my life. And he wants it for us. He wants an intimate relationship with us. He's just been born into the world. Now, over the next year, we have this opportunity to let him grow in us and take over our lives.